Hey pros, this is McCoy Buck. I just want to take a moment and say thank you, first off, for all of the support that I have gotten, whether it is through personal comments or through email or anything like that. You guys are awesome. I love doing this. I love teaching. I love helping other people, and I love teaching all the things that I know about Moho and Anime Studio, giving away free things, anything that I can do to be able to help others. That's actually what I really enjoy doing. I also want to take time to thank those that had filled out the questions for the Google form that I had provided last week, answering the top 2 questions of what are your absolute biggest questions that you have for rigging when it comes to Moho and Anime Studio. Because if some of you don't know, I am creating a course for rigging. It's going to be the biggest course. I've been in the process of making it for about 3 or 4 months now. And just really taking the time to go over everything that I think someone should know from a beginner standpoint all the way to an advanced standpoint of rigging in Moho and Anime Studio. So what I did of writing your 2 top questions, I have them here on my phone, and we're gonna go through it and go over some of these questions. We probably won't have time to go through all of them because there are a lot, and I really appreciate it. There are still some coming in today and yesterday and things like that. So definitely keep these questions coming. If I'm unable to have them in this course upon release, I will make an updated version to have them in the course somewhere down the road when I have time to record some more and update the course. So the first question that we got here is how to make it easy. Well, that's an awesome question. So that's the whole point of this course, is to make it as easy and as clear as possible as I think I can to teach someone how to rig in Moho or Anime Studio. Next one, why is it so complicated? Same type of thing. I will hopefully clear all your doubts and your questions and things like that, so it's not complicated. When it comes to rigging, there is kind of a science to it in a way, but there's definitely a way to learn it fast and easy as well, and that's what I'm hoping to provide you in this course as well. Next one says, sorry, but I'm too new to determine this because I am so new to the software. The other one is correct shading and character turn. So that's really good. So actually the shading, the shadow part, I still have time to record. So actually I think I can touch on that because when it comes to binding shades and shadows and things like that to your character, whether it's like shadows on the arm or on the ground or something like that, that is a question that does come up a lot. I know the characters that I'm working with currently, there's a lot of different styles of characters that we'll be rigging and we'll be using, so you can get a really good grasp of everything. But I don't think any of them have shadows, or none that I can recall. Again, I've been doing this for 4 months now, so I have to go through all the lectures again and really dig through and see if there was something that I was missing. If not, I will definitely add that, because it's basically going to be point binding. Whenever you're doing with shadows and shades and stuff like that, it'll be point binding. The character turn, correct shading and character turn. As far as character turn, I won't be doing, I'll say this up front, I won't be doing any sort of like 360 degree turning characters. And the reason being is because with the experience that I have working on client projects and things like that, it's not necessary. When I first started using Moho and Anime Studio, and when SmartBones came out in Anime Studio 9, I was like, okay, this is awesome. I'm going to make a fully 3D turnable character. He's going to be able to do a head turn, a body turn, all this cool stuff. And over time, I really realized that it's not even necessary. It's not necessary to have turns like that, because there's a planning stage, which is your storyboard. And your storyboard and your character design and all those things go hand in hand when it comes to poses and different angles and things like that. So when I have a quick turnaround time project, it's actually going to take me about 3 to 5 hours to create a character that's fully turnable, as far as like a head that not turns 360, but at least like 180 degrees. So it turns this way and this way along with the body, and it's pretty advanced. I find it takes a lot of time to do all that time into rigging rather than just creating my same character at different angles. So I'll have a 3/4, I'll have a front, and then I'll have a side. And then obviously, because it's software, you could duplicate those and you can flip those around. So you're saving yourself half the time. So you're not having to do your right turn and your left turn, you can just create your right turn, duplicate it, flip the layer, and then you have the left turn. But as far as doing any sort of like 360-degree turns or anything like that, we actually won't be going over that. We'll talk about head turns and things like that, and head turns with mouths and such. But as far as doing a full 160-degree turning character, it's really, especially if you're beginning, it's going to be really frustrating. And it's going to be kind of a waste of time. You might not even finish what you're trying to do. And so what we're going to do is we're going to step through all of the easier stuff, and then we'll get into more of the advanced stuff. The next question was kind of the same. How do you use the rig, shading, highlights? How to set up an entire bipedal rig for rigging in 2.5D. Again, this goes to the same thing. All the characters that we're going to be using, there's going to be one that's quadruped, which is, it has 4 legs, so like a dog or a fox or something like that. We'll be using a bunch of different examples as well in this course. Target bones and stretching, there's a whole section for that, so definitely check out the course for that, because I go into that in a lot of detail. The best practices for attaching, shading, highlighting character. All right, so we got some more of that. Next, I own Pro 11 and hope to get Pro 12, but until then, what are the best practices for vector and bitmap rigging? So hybrid is what they're saying here. Hybrid rigging, I've never done that before. I've never took vector and bitmap images and combined them into one character, if that is the question. But we will be talking about how to do vector rigging and how to do bitmap rigging, both of those separately. So that will definitely be in there. How do I use layer order with rigs, arm in front, turn, arm in back? That's going to be more of an animation question. So actually, this won't be covering any type of animation. As far as the most animation that we'll be going into is like our actions timeline for head turns and such, because you will need to be animating that. But if you are interested in animation, definitely check out my other course, the 2D Animation Essentials in Anime Studio Pro, because that is going to go over the timeline in all of those things in a lot of detail. So definitely check that one out. How do I keep the feet from floating or rotating the wrong way when walking or using other IK related actions? That's the same thing. That's going to have to do with your freeze poses, and it's going to have to do with animation. And I do cover that in the 2D Animation Essentials course. Is there a template to help when designing character pieces to ensure a smoother look? The figure is rigged and animated. There's not really a template, but good word of advice is to think of everything in shapes. Obviously, when you're using Anime Studio, you're creating everything in shapes. So if it's for like an arm, say I have my hand, my forearm, and my bicep, I want to separate these 3 parts into separate parts. So for the hand, I would make this portion, instead of just being it cut off at my wrist, I would round it off. And then for the forearm, I would round it off. So as I move back and forth, there's a smooth, I guess like joint, but there's a smooth rotation. And say if I made a square here and a square here, and I rotate that, there's going to be an opening here, but there's going to be jagged pieces poking out of my hand because I made it as a square. So that's obviously not going to work. But it can also be fixed with smart bones, which I cover a lot in this course as well, is going over all the smart bones. How do you save individual character movements? Walk, run, jump. I actually made a tutorial on that on YouTube of how to save actions. Again, that's going into animation, but the tutorial's on YouTube for free, obviously, so definitely check that out. So the question continues, so that they can be reused in future animations without recreating them. Or can you make a walk cycle that in itself is complete and can run in a loop or cycle and be floated across the scene? Whenever you're working with different characters, this isn't applying to rigging, so I'll just answer the question altogether. But whenever you're working with different characters, say it's both humanoid characters or they have 2 legs and they kind of have a similar skeletal structure, you can kind of sort of get away with it. The one thing that you got to realize is whenever you basically copy and paste your rig or your bone structure to a new character, in Moho 12, they are giving you now the ability to do that, but there's still kind of a bug where your bones are still registered to the previous character that were used before. So if you don't use the same naming conventions for your layers and such, things aren't going to connect. Because when it was bound to that one vector layer and you move it to another one, it's still programmatically thinking it's bound to that other vector layer when you're trying to paste it to this new one. So there's definitely a lot of issues that go on there. And one thing that I talk about a lot is the bone menu. Like up at the top, there's like the file, the bone, the drawing menu, and things like that. And it's a drop down menu, and it talks about unbinding your layers and things like that. And there isn't really good explanation of it in the manual on how to do it. So in the course, I go over a lot of this menu and breaking it down because it's actually really useful, and it's something that doesn't get talked about enough, I think, to really help you in this rigging process, because things can really get screwed up. And sometimes you think the only option is to start over, and it's not. That bone menu will come in handy, and we'll definitely talk about that more. What are the pros and cons about building the character in different programs, such as Photoshop, Clip Studio Paint, and then rig it and animate it with Moho? There's no pros and cons. Whatever software you choose to draw your character, that's totally fine, whether it's Sketchbook Pro, Photoshop, Clip Studio Paint, whatever it may be. Because all you're doing is you're going to be you want to make sure you have an alpha channel, or that is you have a transparent background. You don't want to export a white background into Anime Studio because it'll also have a white background. So that's one thing you want to make sure is it's a program that you can have an alpha channel or have a transparent background. So like a PNG is usually what you're going to be using for transparent backgrounds and things like that. So there's no pros and cons for that. It's whatever program you feel comfortable with drawing. You can draw it and export it into Anime Studio. Best way to handle external handles that a good distance from the joint, exceptions in the joint hierarchy. Unfortunately, I don't really understand that question. If you want to rephrase the question down below in the comments, go ahead and do that, because unfortunately, I don't really understand that question per se. Handling mouths for turning heads that are switch layers. So switch layers and head turns don't go together. And the reason being is because if I was to do a smooth, say, head turn, like with a smart bone, and I have a switch layers are basically, just think about a piece of paper. You drew something on a piece of paper. It's a still image. It's not going to move. A switch layer is basically when you have another mouth shape. You have one open and you have one closed, and you're just switching the two around. That's all that's doing. It's just one still image. Whenever you're doing head turns and things like that, you want to be doing that with smart bones. I tried to see if there's a way to do it with switch layers, but there really isn't. And switch layers are for really, really basic animation. So if you have a quick turnaround time project that you need to get out for a client, switch layers are awesome. They can get you still pretty good results. But if you want to do a lot of emotions and things like that with your character, do smart bones. Use smart bones with your mouths and things like that. Also, it'd be great if there were more explanations about this. I mean, building the character in different programs and what's the different ways to rig it. Do rotation riggings, rotate the character, usage of switch layers. Perfect. Check out the course. Everything will be in there. My second question is, how can I save a rig? Again, going into saving a rig, copy and pasting rigs, don't do it. I don't recommend it. And that's basically that question. Rigging with mesh deformation. That's something new in Moho Pro 12. So if you have Moho 12, they call it mesh deformation, 2D smart warp, and different things like that. So that will be covered in the course. Can't really cover that now because that's a huge question and there's a lot to it. But that'll definitely be in the course. Rigging with masking layers, that's also going to be there as well. You could either do that through point binding or layer binding, or even flexi binding if you wanted to. Effective ways to handle hands and fingers. Everything that I'm going to be teaching you in this course is going to help you understand how rigging can be applied to anything you want to do. I'll show you a bunch of examples, a bunch of different styles, but to go down through every character in their hands and things like that, I'll do really basic things, probably like switch layers or maybe like a finger movement or something like that. Whenever I do a character, I really don't focus too much on the hands a lot. I know there are other animators that are using Moho that are coming to light and are doing really advanced and cool things like that. A lot of the times it's not necessary, especially for a lot of stuff that I do for explainer videos for clients and things like that. You don't do it a lot unless it's just a hand that's in the scene and you want some certain motion. Point binding. Point binding is the way to go for hands. That's the perfect way to do it. Is there a simple way of reusing one rig for different characters? Nope. Don't do it. Don't do it because there's not a really simple way to do it. It's just best just to get into the habit. I know rigging can be a tedious, boring process. When it all comes together, it's really cool. you got to remember that your rig is like your foundation. If you're building a house on a crappy foundation, your house is going to be crappy, or it's going to be falling apart 5-10 years later. So the same thing goes with an animation. I'll tell you a story, because when I first started using Anime Studio, and when I first started doing client projects, I remember I was doing one for, it was a golf course industry, and I was doing an animation for them. And I created this character really quickly. It was a quick turnaround time for this first video. So I created this character really quickly, had really basic bone structure and things like that. And everything was just terrible because I didn't take enough time in that foundation, in that process of rigging my character. And this client, they reached out to me quite a few more times to create other explainer videos with the same character. And it was a nightmare because one, reference layers didn't exist then. So what I had was this copy and paste of this exact same character in these different situations. Maybe I added a hat to him, or I changed a few things out, gave him a different color shirt, but it was the same crappy rig, and it just made everything terrible. I can't remember. There was more point animation of fixing all of the pop-outs and all of the screwed up parts as I was going through the animation than there was bone animation. So it was really a nightmare. And the good rule of thumb there is just to remember that the rigging portion is tedious. You want to just move through it. You want to get to animation super quick. But if your rig is terrible, your animation is going to be terrible. That's just the sad truth about that. Can we do rig with size, not scale? I mean with pin bone. Unfortunately, I don't understand that question, so if you want to rephrase that down in the comments, feel free. Trade-offs between universal and script-specific rigs. How to match character segments to simplify rigging. Again, I know you all want to know how to simplify rigging. Don't do it. Don't do it. From my experience, do not do it. A lot of the rigging process is trial and error. And as you rig your arm, test it. Go through, see if it moves right, see if it does everything that you had planned in your pre-planning in your storyboard. If it works, awesome, move on to the next thing. And then all the things that are kind of wonky and the little points that pop out, then fix those with smart bones. But try to get as flexible as you can without using smart bones. And then that's what smart bones is for, is just to clean up just little additional things. So if you want to have your arm bend and there's a really weird bend, or it's not rounded here, you can round that off with smart bones. What is the best reusable character rig system? I think we answered that. Bone placement consists of smart bone controls. As far as smart bone controls, it honestly just depends. Here's another thing that I do. Before I even create my character in Anime Studio or Moho, I'll draw him on a piece of paper, and I'll do the different character views. So I'll have him from the side, I'll have him facing the forward, I'll have the 3/4 view. And then from there, what I'm going to decide is, okay, is this character simple enough to put into Anime Studio or Moho? And if it's a detailed character, I'll say no. And so I'll refine it, and I'll make, in that design process, I'll make it a lot more simpler. So as I'm drawing, I'm thinking of, okay, if I put this into Anime Studio, he's got to be in shapes. Anime Studio works best with shapes and things like that. So if it's a character that's made up of a bunch of different shapes and it's simplified, then I'm going to ask myself, okay, is there going to be masking? Is this going to be point binding? Is this going to be flexi binding? Is this going to be just layer binding? And depending on your character and depending on what you decide there in that beginning process, that's really going to help you in your rigging as well. Obviously, when you get to the rigging, you're probably going to say, okay, no, I'll actually need to do this because this is going to work better. But at least in your design process, if you're already thinking about the rigging process, then thumbs up for you, because you're in the right place, because it's just going to make things a lot more simpler. So when you go through and you start building your character, you now know that, okay, I do need smart bone dials, or I do need smart bones, I do need actions, I do need all these different things. Is it better to have one fully rotatable rig via smart bones, or multiple flat rigs to be used as the one scene demands, if you plan to use the character for more than a single 20-second animation? So that right there. So you pretty much answered your question there. Again, it depends. It depends on how much time you have. You can really put in a lot of time and create this I wouldn't say 360-degree rig. I still don't really believe in that because nobody's really yet been able to achieve it. You can do head turns, you can do hand turns, you can do foot turns, really basic things, a chest turn about 30 degrees each way, and you'll be good to go. Because as you do a rotation of the chest, just right here, before you get to the 3/4, you can use the 3/4 as an in-between, and then you can go straight to your profile view. And a lot of times, I would definitely suggest looking at different references. So Cartoon Network and different shows like that, they don't show that smoothness of the full 360-degree turn. It's a pop. And so they have just like one slight turn and then it pops into the next position that it needs to be in. And that's about it. There's definitely a lot more questions to go. I hope to answer more of your questions and maybe another video or something like that. Hopefully I answered some questions that could be something quick for you to be like, oh, okay, from now I know what to do. But a lot of this stuff I'm going to be covering in the course. Like I said, I took a lot of time. I really thought this through as far as, okay, from when I was a beginner, what did I need to know? What did I struggle with? And these questions are awesome. These are things that you struggle with and things that you need to know. And I had different animators who had to tell me, McCoy, don't worry about that 360-degree rig. Don't worry if it rotates like that. Plan everything. Go through your storyboard and plan it all out. So I'm telling you the same thing now because from experience, because I was kind of stubborn as well, I didn't really do it. I still tried to do my 360-degree rig. Don't do it, especially if you're in the beginning stages. Don't do it. If you're an intermediate to advanced, you are already familiar with that and you've already learned your lesson. But again, this is for a beginner to advanced level. So I hope you enjoy this Q&A. I would love to do this more in the future, and I thank you for everything that you have done as far as all the support that you've provided, for watching everything that I do and being on the group and on my courses and things like that. And again, this course, it comes out in November. I have yet to release the date as far as when that would be released. And that is it for me, and I will see you guys later.